Serving as the director and chapter leader at Fidelity Investments, our next visionary comes with 20 plus years of rich background in IT consulting as well as product based global companies. He is a technology thought leader and professional AWS architect, primarily focusing on cloud, SRE, and DevOps over the last 5 6 years. He has strong experience in helping multiple organizations in cloud and automation journey as part of the digital transformation. And now he's looking forward to share his insights on DevSecOps as part of digital transformation. I'm truly delighted to now invite on our screens Mr. Nagaraju Kakarla, aka Nag. Nag, waiting for you to take it ahead from here.
Hi everyone, my name is Nag Kakarla. I'm a senior director and chapter leader as part of enterprise cloud computing at Fidelity Investments. And I'm very excited to be back with the DevSecOps India Summit, something that I'm really excited about year after year. I've been an integral part of it. And this year, I'd like to talk a little bit about DevSecOps as part of digital transformation and what does it take to be successful in terms of implementing DevSecOps as part of your digital transformation journey. And I would like to throw some light around some of the best practices that we have been following at Fidelity Investments, especially we being a financial organization is super critical for us in terms of focusing on security and how we kind of integrated it across the deployment pipeline. That's something which I would like to highlight as we go along. So with that said, let me quickly run through the agenda quick few seconds. So we'll have a quick look in terms of what's the changing landscape when we talk about digital transformation and what's the need of the hour, right? Why do we really need to care about it, right? And we'll spend a few minutes in terms of understanding the increased role of security and governance, not just as part of DevSecOps, but in general, right? And to be successful as an enterprise, right? Especially as part of digital transformation, right? So we'll look at some of the specific security practices that are integrated into DevOps, right? And how we can actually implement it the right way, right from the beginning till we put things into production. And then as part of an ongoing operations also, your the so-called get yellow, keep the lights on support, okay? And the focus around being more proactive than reactive, right? And something which I'll share a little bit in detail as to how we are implementing that. And likewise, we'll also look at the changing security landscape, especially in the age of cloud and AI, right? And a few specific best practices, if you look at it from industry standpoint, what are some of the key pillars, right? How does culture and leadership plays a key role as part of DevSecOps, right? And specifically at Fidelity, right? And I'd like to give some specific use cases as to how we have been doing this, right? Before we wrap it up. Okay. I was really amazed when I looked at this slide, and I want to give due credits to the United States Department of Defense. I was really amazed because of the simple fact that DevSecOps is not just part of enterprises today. It has gone to the defense cycles. Some of the world-class defense organizations like US Department of Defense, they have been implementing DevSecOps. And look at the details. I mean, it's just awesome, well in line with what we have been doing at Fidelity. We being a financial organization, we give utmost importance to security, something we have been doing even before the advent of DevSecOps, and we have been able to do even more. And we truly align with some of the things that are highlighted on these slides in terms of focusing on security at the time of planning stage itself, when you actually develop code, right? In fact, going to the extent of doing security as code, right? We're something which we are doing across many of the business units at Fidelity, right? Implementing your threat models as part of your planning stage itself, securing your coding, using many of the quality gates, implementing many of the quality grades across the pipeline. Not just the traditional testing models like static testing, dynamic testing, some of the penetration testings, right, including digital signatures, right, as part of some of the solutions, especially for the financial applications, right, payment systems, tax gateways, so on and so forth. In fact, online mortgage systems and all of these things, right, they actually warrant this security as part of systemic design itself, something which we have been implementing end to end, right? And once you put things into production, again, as I said earlier, including some of the security vulnerabilities, right? So used to be the case where you unearth some of those vulnerabilities once you put solutions into production and then try to fix those, referring to CVE databases, so on and so forth. But we're actually doing it in a thoroughly proactive manner in terms of referring to the latest vulnerabilities and actually fixing it as part of the coding phase itself before we actually go to higher environments. So typically development environment and maybe higher level of environment to go for thorough testing on top of development. So QA or UAT max, right? In the production, absolutely we make sure there are no vulnerabilities in the code that we are deploying into production. And on an ongoing basis, like I explained in one of the previous slides, we actually get those actionable insights from the monitoring data and actually predict those vulnerabilities. In fact, we have been able to contribute to some of those vulnerabilities, right? That's how we have been giving utmost importance to security as part of the pipelines itself. It's a truly DevSecOps model, and this is something. Even though we have multi-speed IT across business units, we have been able to give utmost importance in each of the BUs. In fact, we have many communities of practice where the teams and the groups come together to share best practices that they implement within their groups, and we have been able to implement that and make it as part of a culture across the organization. We'll quickly move on. Pretty much, all of the key areas here in terms of focus on security, especially, in today's age of cloud and AI, like I said here, right? So applies equally to all the, key areas here, right? From infrastructure perspective, in terms of having the logical segmentation, having, the boundary enforcement, right? And having the right security gates, firewalls, right? And then security groups, if you talk about cloud, for example. And from people perspective, having right authentication and authorization models and being able to manage those secrets in a secured manner, right? Using appropriate vaults. We have many solutions, right? Both open source, proprietary, and many of our in-house built solutions as well to address these areas, not just from infrastructure and people perspective. In fact, from application and data, right? And data is super critical for us, we being a financial organization, and likewise for our applications, APIs, right? Many of the microservices, right? Some of the monolithic and legacy applications, we have been migrating to microservices, and as part of that migration journey itself, we are actually building security into those systems and APIs. Again, super important, especially in today's in hybrid cloud world, where we have public private clouds, and then in many of the cases we have solutions still restricted to your on-premise data centers. But in any case, it's super important, something we have been assigning great importance to. Again, this must be a familiar slide to many of the folks, and especially if you're associated with DevOps or DevSecOps in some way or the other, right? It's like having different levels of focus in terms of art of DevSecOps, right from engineering teams who can actually experiment, help you automate, test, right, and come up with best practices and solutions, the model solutions from a security standpoint, to hunting, detecting, and containing, right? But honestly, if you ask me, we haven't been we're from a focus standpoint, again, security operations, absolutely, that is super important. But because we have been able to build it, integrate it into our systems, right, it's becoming that much more easier from security operations perspective. And then compliance, well, compliance is not security. In a way, it is related. And we make sure from a regulation and compliance perspective, we are always on top of it, complying with all that is needed for any financial organization, right? And then security science, the last one, is all about the continuous improvement, learning from the process, and then building those best practices into your culture, basically. Key pillars of DevSecOps, and again, this is something many of us are aware of, right? Three things that I would call out on this slide. From an organization standpoint, as much as tools, technology, process, it's super important that we build all of these things into culture. So cultural transformation, in fact, I would personally say that there is no digital transformation without cultural, transformation in the organization. Because if you look at the industry data also, out of those 70 plus, 70% or even more organizations that have been adopting digital transformation in some way or the other, only about 18 to 20% of the organizations have been truly successful, right? If you look at some of the key aspects of digital transformation, and the biggest reasons there has been, one is could be lack of executive leadership. That could be lack of support from executive leadership. That is one thing. And the other thing, even the most common thing that stands out if you look at some of the industry reports also, is like organizations, they haven't been able to bring that cultural transformation, motivating people to come out of their comfort zones, embrace some of these new age practices, pick up new tools and technologies and all of those things. So that is super important. And also being able to collaborate effectively across the organization is not easy, especially for an enterprise like Fidelity Investment. It hasn't been easy, but we had a great support from our executive leadership team, because of which we have been able to disseminate that into our culture, right? And likewise, building the security fabric as part of our culture, right? Learning from success and failures, likewise, right? We're bound to fail, we're bound to see, errors, right? Mistakes are bound to happen. But again, how do we react to that? How do we address that is, the most important thing there. Likewise, from process perspective, we're truly agile. In fact, I'm very proud to say that being such a large organization, right? Of course, we have different ways of implementing agile, be it Scrum, Kanban, and even SAFe at enterprise level for the portfolio level solutions. But in any case, right, we have communities of practice again, both from agile perspective and from technology perspective, API perspective, so on and so forth. So we have well integrated process, well designed process across the enterprise, because of which we have been able to implement these newest things like BDD, TDD, continuous adaptation, so on and so forth, right? And then from technology perspective, again, it's not just about tools and some of the newest technologies or frameworks. It's also about focus on automation, cloud, and containerization, right? And many of the solutions that we are building, especially migrating from monolithic to microservices, right? We're actually hosting those truly in containerized workloads, that too managed in Kubernetes clusters. In some of the cases, it's the open source Kubernetes, and many of the cases, especially as part of the cloud migration, we are going native, cloud native, right? Using things like EKS, Amazon EKS, and Azure AKS, right? So on and so forth. And of course, some of the other solutions like OpenShift also we have in some of the BUs. Rancher is another one, right? Which is pretty popular, right, in some of the BUs. But the point I'm trying to make is more of a balanced focus on technology, not just tools and technologies, but automation, focus on containerization, right? Moving away from the age-old ways of setting up a manual infrastructure, to actually moving into a truly cloud enabled way, right? Infrastructure as code, right? Likewise, security as code, right? Last but not the least, from technology standpoint, and of course, last but not the least here, and as part of the key pillars, having the right governance models, right, plays a big role. And needless to say, is one of the key factors for us, right, in terms of succeeding as a DevSecOps organization. I'll quickly jump into the next slide. I briefly mentioned about it in the previous slide. Two factors that play instrumental role for the success of DevSecOps. One is having transformational leadership, great support from not just executives but across the the leadership chain. That is one thing. The other one is the cultural transformation, right? The focus on culture, right? Shift in our culture in terms of focusing on things from an age-old ways, manual ways, and routine ways of doing things, to moving towards new age practices, adopting new tools and technologies, revamping our process, so on and so forth. Something which we have been we are actually, I must say, we are blessed to have that kind of leadership at Fidelity Investments. And that's how, this being part of our culture, it goes all the way down. The other one I just mentioned briefly. One is the cultural transformation that also involves building a culture of innovation, right, across all the key areas. It's not just process, people, process, and technology, but governance also, especially for a financial organization, is even more important, right? Having the right the technology vision, right? Having the right platforms, right? Investing in the right areas, right? Building that self-intelligence into your systems, right? And the other one is innovation, right? Opening it up for the people to come and explore, right? Democratizing it and having the right avenues, right? A lot of those brown bag sessions, and then cross events, right? And cross BU events, right? Some of that where you can basically build that healthy competition among people to come up, share their ideas, actually implement it, do some POCs, and then take it further in terms of productionalizing it, right? And actually being able to get actionable insights out of that through right analytic models. That is another one which is very important. From people or talent perspective, again, I'm very proud to see some of the world-class learning platforms at our organization, and also in terms of supporting the people, right? Be it in terms of certification, in terms of letting people go attend conferences, right? And then picking up some new skills, and also supporting them through many of the internal job offers where they can go and pick something which may be completely new to them, right? Sometimes, right, you may get completely radical ideas, new ideas from somebody who hasn't explored the space by virtue of their experience in the previous areas. So it's all about experimenting, right? And empowering and experimenting with all of these things, and in line with the career development of people also, which is very, very important to actually promote that culture of innovation, right? Last but not the least, governance. Needless to say, this is something which is super critical, for any organization, and especially for a financial organization like ours, right? Quickly jump into the next one. What do you really need to care about it? And some of the things I've been highlighting in the previous slides, but just to call out specifically why we care about it, at our organization. And this is something which applies to any organization, right? I mean, it's been years now that we have moved away from the traditional SDLC model to a secure SDLC model, where we think of security right from design phase itself, right? And actually thinking about and actually designing your, systems, right? And architectures, right? Keeping security in mind right from the beginning, and then actually integrating it with, your continuous delivery pipelines at the build stage itself, having the right review boards, be it architectural review boards or, for reviewing your coding, having enterprise level coding standards, right? Having mentoring teams for people to actually understand what are some of those best practices, and then if there are some mistakes, how we can actually correct it early on in the delivery pipeline, right? Having the right the training avenues for them, boot camps, brown bags, and some of which are actually very popular at Fidelity, right? One of the key reasons why our associates really give us great NPS. I mean, there's nothing about boasting about my organization, but this is something which I'm very proud, having worked with many of the organizations across the industry, right? And I find it very unique here. It's something which has been really contributing to the success of our DevSecOps here. Likewise, during the testing phase and also vulnerabilities, right? And I kind of touched upon this in one of the previous slides, whereby we try to honor those vulnerabilities, right? We keep ourselves up to date in terms of integrating our systems with the CVE databases, right? Get the latest in terms of what are the vulnerabilities across the various areas, be it infrastructure, applications, database, right? You name it, right? There are we keep saying, especially in today's complex world of your cloud, open source, proprietary, your own in-house applications, right? With the combination of all of this data, right? And that a lot of incidents, cyber attacks that we see, right? So in the face of all of this, it's super important, right, that we actually focus on these areas, right? As the security space becomes more and more complex, we need to think of it much ahead of the curve. That's one of the key reasons. And moving on, I touched upon this one briefly, whereby we completely moved away from a project model to a product model, right? Embracing agile at the organization level. At the enterprise level, we're truly agile. Of course, again, there are different ways of implementing agile. Say, for example, if I have to quote Scrum, which is very popular and being adopted by many of the business units within our organization, right from your sprint planning to actually having the daily sync ups, right, daily stand-ups from Scrum perspective, and actually having those sprint review meetings, and then product review meetings, and then lessons learned, so on and so forth, right? We do it very religiously to understand truly as to how we're actually marching forward in line with your product vision. And then, of course, we have different levels of focus from a product manager perspective, overall product leader, and then product owners who work end to end. And we truly work with our engineering teams to understand their inputs, also to get their inputs in terms of what should be the journey for us for the product, right? Because they can actually share a lot of inputs in terms of working on the products right away, and also many of the security and operations teams who can give us great insights as to what are the challenges we see in production, how can we actually eliminate some of those challenges as we enhance our products, as we build new products, right? And that is one thing which has been playing a key role. And also being able to empower our teams to be able to work from anywhere, right? Be it their local laptop, or it could be a HVD, it could be within a cloud, and being able to actually check in their code from all of those places into the source code repository, the right repository, having the right access groups, which is very, very important. And then as we move from legacy to microservices architecture, right? Monolithic to microservices, right? What are some of the things that we can actually think right from the beginning, rather than doing it as an afterthought later? And also, for some of the applications where we do a lift and shift into cloud, right? Still, we actually focus on continuous delivery there, even if it's not microservices based model, right? Which is very, very important, right? To actually if you look at some of the popular KPIs associated with DevSecOps, be it in terms of the deployment frequency, the lead time for changes, reducing the change failure rate, and the mean time to restore from an operation standpoint. Right? And all of these things, right, we thoroughly think of as part of the journey itself. Okay? And then building those self-organized teams. Again, this is more of a culture, right? Referring to Agile Manifesto, looking at how some of the elite groups are actually doing from an Agile and DevOps or DevSecOps standpoint. How are they actually addressing some of these things as part of their cultural transformation itself, and taking the best of it and taking a cue, out of those elite groups and actually implementing it as part of an ongoing, journey. That is another one. Having the right structure, like I briefly mentioned earlier, from a product-based model, right? Having the right team structures, right, is something which we have been focusing on, and we are truly business aligned, right? What does the business need? When does it need? What kind of product is needed, right? So on an ongoing basis, through this collaborative process that we have, we're able to advance our product journey much ahead of what we would have done otherwise without this model. I'll quickly jump over to the next slide in the interest of time. Again, security is a competitive advantage. Two things I'd like to call out here. It's an open secret. I mean, the earlier you fix security in your delivery chain, that much better it is, right? And industry data shows it's 30 times more cheaper to fix it early on. So it's all about the shift left, which we talk about from a DevOps standpoint, right? And likewise, today, if you see, I briefly mentioned earlier, and we are no exception from my organization perspective, right? We have open source components, we have proprietary solutions, we have a lot of our inbuilt solutions, many of the industry standard but inbuilt solutions, right? So with this kind of combination, right, and security becomes complex, right? So it's very, very important we address it appropriately with respect to each of these areas, right? And we don't have to name which organizations, but then we have been seeing some of the recent data breaches and what the kind of cost it would incur if there is a data breach. And that's something which traditionally Fidelity has been addressing for ages, right? And just to make sure there's no data breach. And touch wood, so far we haven't seen anything. And with the kind of tightened security process that we're integrating into our pipelines, I think it's only going to get better. It has been getting better. Okay. Quickly moving on. All of us know, and especially in today's complex world of cloud, on-premise, right, and then open source, proprietary, and all of this, right? Especially as we empower our developer community to explore things, right? Mistakes are bound to happen, right? And that's where hackers look forward to opportunities across different areas. It's not just about targeting people, but also trying to exploit the process gaps, trying to find loopholes within the technology itself. That's where we expect our technology providers to actually implement security into products as tightly as possible. In fact, it's been happening with all the more focus that we are seeing as part of digital transformation across the industry. And that's something which that's something where we give a lot of weightage from my organization perspective also. The next one I touched upon this one. This is something which is more and more becoming part of our culture, right? To be more proactive and predictive, right? In some of the organizations, right? And of course, still there is a way and there's some work for us to do, but we are truly proactive and we're actually going more towards predictive way of doing things, right? Not just from the point of view of deploying solutions, but also in terms of running it. And some of the industry data, we may not have to go through each of those points, but industry data shows, right, there are huge costs, right? And if there are compromises, and that's where it warrants more proactive work. And it's a requirement actually for many of the organizations. And if you really want to be successful, DevSecOps journey, you need to be that much more and more proactive and go towards being predictive based on all those learnings along the way. And one key call out on this slide, this is something which we have been doing consistently while we are already a high performing organization, right? In terms of all the key areas, people, process, technology, governance, security, to be called out specifically, right? And across all these areas, we always look forward to guidance from the industry, right? Look forward to some of the elite organizations there, elite technology organizations, to understand how they are actually doing things, right? And how they have been part of those elite groups. And we have been moving more and more, from high-end, high-performing organization to an elite organization. In some of the BUs, we're already there, right? But would like to make sure we're truly elite from an industry standard perspective. And I must admit that we are there, right? And definitely, it's an ongoing journey, right? I'll move on to the next one. Like I said earlier, mistakes are bound to happen, especially as we have a complex, infrastructure today, right? And it's no different, in case of my organization, right? We have public cloud, private cloud, our own data centers, right? Of course, the kind of technology combinations that we have, and as the focus goes from, as the focus in terms of deploying solutions from, weeks to days to minutes, right? As it gets reduced more and more because of, the business demand, we want to catch up with the market transitions. We want to deliver the solutions to customers as quickly as possible with the right quality and security, right? Mistakes are bound to happen, but then we can't afford to let mistakes happen within production. That's where we truly empower our developers, our builders, our operations guys to actually experiment with things within the pre-production environment the way we want, giving them the right avenues, right trainings, right? And a lot of other the helping hands in terms of having the right communities of practice, centers of excellence, so on and so forth, which has been helping them experiment with things. Mistakes happen, but we also support them, right, when mistakes happen, so that there's no fear factor, which is very, very important, right? And you need to kind of inculcate that as part of your culture itself, right? One of the key reasons why we have been able to succeed in our DevSecOps journey. Another one, which is a key thing, and talking about DevSecOps philosophy, is all about continuous everything. How we improve on an ongoing basis across various stages in your DevSecOps chain, continuous delivery pipeline, right? So it's all about having the long term vision. Where do you want to end up? And then it's more of a reverse engineering. This is what we want to achieve, and then what does it take? What kind of strategy you need to have? How are we going to execute it? Do you have the right leadership support for that, right? Are you able to actually bring in that cultural transformation? That's when the continuous everything is going to be possible, right from analyze, release, test, development, the pretty straightforward across the chain. And also, last but not the least, having that continuous feedback, making your associates or your employees, your developers, engineers, as part of the continuous feedback at the loop back chain, so that you can actually get actionable insights through all the valid inputs from these guys by virtue of what they see in the systems, be it both positives, negatives, everything, right? Everything matters, right? That's how you build that high performing teams at all levels, by equipping them and giving them the insight across the areas beyond what they would what they would be doing on a day to day basis, and actually building that cultural change, right? And zero trust security, and this is something which and this is something which is becoming popular with the industry last few years, and this has always been there with the financial organizations, and definitely with Fidelity for ages, and is going to go better, right, with all the focus that we have. All right, that's pretty much I had, from my organization standpoint, some of the best practices, so on and so forth, that we have been doing in our own journey to succeed as a truly digital organization. Before we wrap it up, more of a 7 commandments or 7 principles or whatever you call it, and just picked it from somewhere. And the reason why I picked it is it truly applies to many of the things that we are doing within our organization, right? Especially from a security standpoint, right? To focus more and more on operations to get more insights, so that you can actually build that, integrate that into your product, into your continuous delivery chain, supply chain. Another one, this is something which is very, very important. The security is not necessarily a responsibility of your security team, ISO team, or whoever. It has to be everybody's responsibility. That's where you need to build it into your culture. Of course, we want to be perfect, but then mistakes are inevitable, especially in a complex enterprise system. But then how do you address it? Like I said earlier, that plays a key role. Right? Again, try to be more proactive, address your compliance, and empowering your team, and actually supporting them, so that there's no blaming culture, right? Even if issues happen, support them, understand why it happens, and guide them as to how they can actually do it better going forward. And then continuous everything. So all of these things, which we briefly covered in the previous slides, right, that matters a lot. And pretty obvious in terms of business benefits. We have been talking through this, so we may not have to go through in detail. But again, we've been able to reap the benefits out of a religious implementation of DevSecOps and Fidelity investments, and some of the things which I shared during the course of this presentation, I'm sure you would find it useful. and actually align and connect with what you may be doing within your organization and find ways to do things in a better way. Thank you.